Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the League of Women Voters Moscow session. Today's program is on housing issues in Moscow and Latah County. Today's presentation is the conclusion of our speakers series, and we'll start up again in January. So if you have ideas for topics or prospective speakers, please let any of the leadership of the league know, or take a look at the website for some contact information, because we want to address the issues of concern to all of you. So other than the announcement that we're going to conclude our speakers forums after today's presentation and resume after the first of the year, are there any other announcements for the interest of the league? Okay, without further ado then, today's panel represents an array of expertise on the subject of housing, and we hope that you will be inspired to ask some probing questions at the conclusion of all three presenters' remarks. I'll begin by introducing the three panelists, then I'll turn it over to them for their presentations, for discussion, and for audience interaction. We're aiming for adjournment today at 1 o'clock. So it's a really tight schedule. We'll try to stick to it. Let's see, I have been told that our first presenter today is Bob Tribblehorn. Bob is president of the St. Francis of Assisi Conference for St. Vincent de Paul, for which he has been a member and volunteer for 7 years. And let me test the sound out there. Can you all hear me in the back row? You're good? Okay. Bob retired in 2014 following a 35-year career with the Natural Resources Conservation Service in Montana, Alaska, and Idaho, where he worked with farmers, ranchers, conservation districts, resource conservation and development councils, and city and county governments on a wide variety of conservation and rural development activities. Today, Bob will describe his experiences with St. Vincent de Paul in providing housing assistance, including rent, utilities, emergency housing, and other aid to the poor in Latah County. Requests for help have increased, and more assistance is being provided to families and individuals in this area. Our second presenter this afternoon, will be Nils Peterson, who has served as executive director at Moscow Affordable Housing Trust since 2014. During that time, the trust has created 7 houses, the most recent 4 of which have been sold using the community land trust model for permanent affordability. Nils is the 2022-23 board president for the Northwest Community Land Trust Coalition, which is partnering with the state of Washington on a $1 million contract to provide capacity building for current and aspiring community land trusts. Nils's presentation is titled, "Can Thinking Small Make Houses Affordable?" According to the US Census, the number of residents per household has been falling, while the size of new houses has been rising. The average new house today has 500 more square feet per person than it did in 1975. Correct, Nils? And the house size is a driver of sales price. So today, Nils will describe Moscow Affordable Housing Trust exploration of the economics of building smaller, more affordable houses. Our third and final presenter today is Cody Riddle. He's a graduate of the University of Idaho. Go Vandals. There he is. After working for the city of Boise for nearly 18 years, most recently as the deputy planning director, he returned to Moscow about a year ago to become deputy city supervisor in community development. In that role, Cody oversees a team responsible for land use planning, permitting, inspection, engineering, and grant writing and administration. Planning and permitting processes are important factors in affordability. Today, Cody will tell us about historical trends in housing, the role of local government in affordable housing, and current and potential tools at the city's disposal that influence the housing market. Please join me in welcoming today's panelists. And introduce yourself again, please.
Hi. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Yeah, I'm Bob Tribblehorn, and I am here representing St. Vincent de Paul. So a man and his pregnant wife have 2 young children. He is a seasonal construction worker who was recently laid off. He may be on call depending on project opportunities. He is looking for additional part-time work to help pay those bills. A recent expensive car repair put them behind. They need $1,000 for rent and owe a Vista $1,300. If they don't get their rent, they may face eviction. They requested help from St. Vincent de Paul. So St. Vincent de Paul is an international lay ministry of the Catholic Church. It was founded in 1833 back in France. We are called to feed, clothe, find shelter for the poor, and minister to the sick. The assistance can go to anyone, regardless of religion, race, ethnicity, gender, etc. Our local Latah County, St. Vincent de Paul, conference formed in 2002. We are attached to the Lewiston-Clarkston St. Vincent de Paul group with the same nonprofit 501c3 status, but have different members, boards, and officers. Unlike our Clarkston affiliate, we don't have a thrift store or any overhead. All of our members are volunteers. We don't have an office. We have an answering machine that we share with the St. Mary's Food Bank. We pass the hat to cover the small amount of administrative funds needed for postage, for example. All funds we receive for our Latah County St. Vincent de Paul group go to the people we serve. More than 1/2 of our funds come from personal donations. We receive 3 to 4 grants per year, but we would not be able to provide the service to people in Latah County without the generosity of our benefactors. The group provides monetary assistance for rent, utilities, emergency housing, gasoline for people to get to work or doctor's appointments. We pay for some medical bills and dental bills, car repairs, cell phones, phone cards, and many other things. We get 15 to 25 calls per week, and we meet once a week to discuss those cases. Occasionally, people donate cars to us, which then we donate to our clients. We meet with people, listen to, discuss their needs, and try to help them with some of their difficulties, and we pray with them. Our cases and case sheets are confidential. Our group currently has 16 active Vincentians and another 8 or so who assist as seconds on case visits. Becky, not her real name, is on Social Security disability due to a serious injury. She can't work. She receives a little over $800 per month. She's divorced, has 2 children, and gets very little child support. With Idaho housing assistance, her rent is $148 a month, but she owes $900 on her Avista bill. We partner with several other organizations for housing-related issues, including Sojourners, the Recovery Center, Hope Center, Family Promise, the Community Action Partnership, St. Mary's Food Bank, other churches, and provide referrals to Idaho Housing and other state agencies. If you are part of an organization or church and they're not currently a part of the Human Needs Council in Moscow, please consider attending their monthly meetings. Sojourners is a critical player for transitional housing in Moscow and a very close partner of ours on a regular basis. Earlier this fall, a man came to Moscow expecting a job. He started the job, but it didn't pan out after a few weeks. He was living in his car. He has no family in the area. Sojourners had a space in their men's unit that would open up in a week or 2. Our group provided the man with his request for 5 nights at a local motel, and he's currently going to University of Idaho part-time. Housing-related assistance. This is the question, right? Are needs increasing from previous years? Do we have a problem? This is our case book from 2020. Every one of these yellow sheets in here represents a different case visit. In 2021 and 22, we needed 2 of these 3-ring binders. In 2021, St. Vincent de Paul completed 1,800 client visits. We served over 3,400 people, Our 20 to 25 volunteers put in over 3,300 hours and drove nearly 2,700 miles to serve those clients. Total expenses amounted to $124,600. This is approximately $68 per visit and $35 per person served. Of the $124,600, our 2021 expenses for housing-related needs were $79,500. In 2022, and these are the totals at the beginning of November, rental assistance. This is to keep families in their homes, to avoid eviction, or to help them get out of homelessness with a deposit, first month's rent, that kind of thing. 82 different clients requested rental assistance with 1 to 5 people in those households. Rent assistance ranged from $54 to $1,180 for a total of over $41,700. Emergency housing. 66 clients requested emergency housing, usually motel nights, with 1 to 5 people in those families. Motel nights range from 1 to 26, but are rarely over 8. This is a total of 267 nights. So at a minimum of $66 a night, this is well over $17,000. Utilities, Avista bills, water bills, those kinds of things. 59 clients requested utility assistance, affecting 1 to 8 family members in those households. And assistance ranged from $99 to $1,049 for a total of more than $23,000. Total assistance at the beginning of November for 2022 was $82,500. This is $3,000 more than 2021 with 2 months left in the calendar year. A single mom and her 3 children aged 3 to 10 need $600 for a month's rent. The rent increased from $450 a month over the summer. She is doing CNA home health care, but due to COVID, her hours were reduced along with a number of clients. She received $930 in August, which was better than the $857 she earned in July. Getting new clients and additional hours has been difficult, especially with managing the young household. Rental and utility assistance and homelessness are obviously very big issues and critical needs for many people in Moscow and Latah County. But much of the homelessness is hidden. We don't have the obvious homeless camps as in Spokane and larger cities. St. Vincent de Paul provides temporary stopgap assistance for people. We don't provide long-term ongoing assistance. So we try to help people stay in their homes and hopefully avoid homelessness. Sojourners and other nonprofit organizations, grantors, local city and state agencies, and churches also provide an important service to our local area. Moscow is a generous community. Did you know that local law enforcement officers occasionally put homeless folks up at motels out of their own pockets? I'm not a researcher. I'm only providing a snapshot of the current situation for the need for housing and related assistance at the lower end of the income levels in Latah County. And I can only talk about the needs of people who ask for our assistance, so the needs are greater than what we are aware of as an organization. Peter is retired and gets some Social Security income. It isn't much to live on, but he gets by most months. Winter is most difficult. He lives in an old trailer that is in terrible condition, but he owns it. It's home, and his things are there. He uses a large portion of his SSI for lot rent. He takes advantage of the St. Mary's Food Bank. Needed trailer repairs would cost much, much more than his trailer's worth. Cold months are the worst because it costs more to heat the place. So he closes up half the trailer and lives in his bedroom much of the time. He doesn't ask for much, but needed gas to get to a doctor's appointment a couple weeks ago. He could obviously use help for a variety of things. Thank you.
Quite a sobering study in the issues that are that nexus of housing and other challenges that our folks in our community at the lowest income levels struggle with constantly. My name's Nils Peterson. I'm the Executive Director for Moscow Affordable Housing Trust. When I was first hired, Steve Bonner of Sojourners was on the board of the trust. And Steve said, well, you're gonna need an office. You are gonna come over to Sojourners and you will use the office my bookkeeper uses. You will work mornings. Steve just solved that problem. That was, whether he knew it or not, a great instructional experience for me. I left the door open and I heard versions of every one of those stories as they came through the front office at Sojourners. And I realized how critical housing is and how devastating losing housing is, because many of the things that you had in your house are now lost. It's all you can get into your car or all you can get somewhere, while you then try to make that recovery back to being housed. And so this presentation really struck with me those memories. I'm working at a different tier than that story, those stories. If any of you didn't get one of these when you came in, whoop, maybe Nancy, you can help just spread them around if I don't drop them all over the floor. And I'm gonna have to escape out of that and find Excel. Okay. So just as the folks we just heard about are members of our community who need housing help, the next tier up, a bunch of Moscow's workforce is also struggling for housing. And I want to start this by sort of asking you, who do you want living in our community? And I'm expecting answers like, well, our school teachers, our first responders, our people who work downtown at stores, the employees of our various stores downtown, the staff at the university. And then I'm going to ask you to think, what are those people paid? And numbers are going to pop into your head like 35,000 or 45,000 or 50,000 a year. And that's going to be the starting point for our conversation today, as I'm trying to figure out how to provide housing for that group of our workforce, teachers in the school district, staff at the university, staff at the hospital, employees downtown, the folks we need to make our community go forward, who are on the worker strata, not at the management and higher strata. And so, this is now the second time I've done a presentation using Excel rather than PowerPoint. So bear with me while I explore it. The federal government establishes annually for our county what they call the area median income, and from which they calculate fractions of that area median income. And the fraction at 80% of area median income is a significant, your recorder isn't recording?
No.
You're good?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. 80% is a tier that the federal government uses, a bunch of grant organizations use, and I'm going to show you what those numbers look like, and you're going to say, oh, that's our people. For a one-person household, 80% AMI is $44,200. Do you know folks who make that money or less, who are working in our community? For a two-person household, $50,500. There are certainly folks that you know who do not make that much money in our community. And it's a couple, it's a parent and a child. We go up one more here, if I can figure out how to do this. 3-person household, 56.8. Again, there are a lot of jobs that are not paying that much money in our community and are held by people that are our friends, neighbors, or coworkers who have 3 people in their household. Okay? So those are the people that I'm charged with helping. Bob is charged with helping a different strata. Also important. This is a group that we hope will stay here, that we hope we can hire. And they come to town or they look around town and they say, $500,000 is not the price I can pay for a house. $350,000 is not the price I can pay for a house. That's the exercise we're going to walk through. And I want to focus it on the 1-person household that we just sold that house and that flyer to. Okay? 1-person household making a maximum of $44,200. He's not making quite that. The federal government defines affordable. Everybody says, oh, this is an affordable house at $475. Well, no. It's affordable to somebody. 30% of your gross income being spent on your housing expense is what the federal definition of affordable is. So Bill Gates lives in an affordable house. Don't worry, because he doesn't spend more than 30% of his income on it, right? You may or may not live in an affordable house by that definition. My mission is only to sell houses to people for whom it's affordable by that definition. So how does that work? The monthly payment, the maximum monthly payment that income can make is that for their whole housing expense. So in the case of sales, that's their PITI, right? What they're paying the bank on their mortgage, including the insurance and taxes. So let's kind of back those numbers out. And all of these are a little fuzzy, so you gotta work with me on the fuzziness. 12% of that is taxes, 5% of that is home insurance. We're doing community land trust. And you're gonna see how that's an important strategy here. Yes, sir.
Could you use the numbers, because your visual is not.
You can't, let me help you by reading the numbers out. So 44, the 30% is $1,100 a month. And taxes are 133, insurance is 55, and then I'm gonna speak about the land lease line here. What we do as a strategy to reduce the cost for our buyer is we don't sell them the land. You think of your house, you think of your tax statement on your house, it's got 2 lines. It's got the lot or the land and the improvements. And you pay tax on all of that. We say, hey, we could store a subsidy for our buyer permanently by not selling them the land and leasing them the land at an inexpensive price. So we lease the land at $75 a month. And the particular project that we're working on that involves that house, if you haven't seen it, as you go on Palouse River Drive east, so you leave from, you're coming up from Lewiston or going down towards Lewiston, you turn east. John Deere is kind of on the corner, and then you come along the health department, University Collision, you may have all been there once or twice. Up on the hill above University Collision with a good view of their roof. That house, you've seen it, it's black, is the one that we're talking about. And it's in a little homeowners association. So there's a $25 a month charge for that. Some places when they do an analysis like this, they say you gotta put all the utilities in, but some don't. So I've left the utilities, the person has to pay utilities, but for this calculation, there's 0 for utilities. And then here's another magic thing. Private mortgage insurance. When you buy a house, you get a mortgage, if you don't put 20% down, and I certainly didn't when I bought a house, you have to buy private mortgage insurance. It's just part of the package that the bank rolls up for you. And that can cost 8%. So when we start subtracting all of those, out of that $1,100, $288 are going to all of those costs. That's leaving $817 to actually pay the bank for the mortgage, principal and interest. And if we say, let's do a 30-year note, most of us have done that, we can then ask the question, what's the interest rate today? Which is staggering. Last time I did this spreadsheet, it was 3.5 that I had in there instead of 6.75. And that number is obviously bobbling around, but it's a lot higher. We all know it's a lot higher than it was if I'd done this talk a year ago, right? Using a mathematical formula, you can say, well, how much debt will that $817 payment at 6.75 for 30 years, how much can I buy with that today? $125,000. That's an affordable house for this one-person household earning $44,200. $125,000. There's nothing on the market for $125,000. You might find a single wide. The lot rent is going to be significantly more than the $75 that our land lease is. If you then put down 3%, sort of the least you can put down for most loans, you've got a buying capacity of $129,000. Okay? If we then say, well, what does the land cost? And I've got a 0 in here now. We can back that out and say, well, what is the improvements? What can we use for the improvements? In this case, it's 28. But what could you buy a lot for these days? I'm looking at Karen. Karen, give me a number.
Probably 100,000 up.
I'm going to say, I agree. That's the right answer. Maybe you get a steep one for 70. Maybe you can use the city's twin home rules and split a steep one for 70 and get it for 35 each. So I'm going to put 35,000 in for the land cost. 35,000 for land. Now I've only got 80,000 left to spend on the building. What does it cost per square foot these days to build a building? It's a shake your head ridiculous number, and I'm using $240 a square foot. Okay, not big, 240 bucks. Dividing how many square feet can this person earning that with a land cost of $35,000, 337 square foot house. Some wiggle room here, back and forth. But let's talk about how big it's like this presenter's table kind of size house. We're at the sort of ridiculous level. So let's say you say, well, that's too small. I want a bigger house. I want an 800 square foot house. Still a very small house. This room might be 800 square feet. Well, somebody needs to come up with $111,000 in subsidy to make that happen. The buyer cannot buy that 800 square foot house. That's the problem of affordable homeownership in Moscow. That what you could hope to buy with your income is so small. And as it gets smaller, I like to pick on Cody, the city. Let's say I was going to do a 1 square foot house. The plan review fee from the city is $500. So just to get them to look at my plans for my 1 square foot house, which is obviously a ridiculous house, right? It's $500. To pull the sewer and water to my house. I see Paul Kimmel's face, right? You at least let me pay for that wire over time by buying electricity. The fixed costs, the smaller you go, the fixed costs go higher and higher and higher. Because it's the same for my 1 square foot house and my 4,000 square foot house to get a number of the things I need done from the city and things like that. Anyway, so that little house on the card, fun, it's black, was designed by University of Idaho students last year, starting about now, and built by them over the summer, and then school started and it stretched into the fall. And some of you, I recognize, were at the open house on October 22nd, I think it was. Huge learning happened. I am so glad that we partnered with the university on that, what I saw those students gaining. What we gained was a house. And I went into it and I said to my board, let's just figure this as cost plus. Students have worked on a budget. I don't know how good that budget is. I don't know how realistic it is. There are things that they don't want to include in their budget, like what does it cost to have paved parking to park your car off the street? Because they're not building it, right? So we sunk a lot of, the Housing Trust, sunk a lot of money into it that the buyer is not, and you'll see that on the back. 2 pies. One is what does it cost, and 2 is who's doing the paying. But we learned a lot, and I learned a lot. And we're getting ready to do house number 2. The foundation is already dug. The concrete guy doesn't want to pour concrete in this weather. But the goal is that we have a foundation ready before graduation in the spring, a house designed and ready to build before graduation in the spring. And they roll out and get started on house number 2. What I'm hoping is that their creativity can squeeze out some of the prices from the sort of generic standard building approach. Maybe somewhat different materials, definitely small, with the goal that we can begin to get down to a point where this buyer can actually pay the cost of the house. The Housing Trust will provide the land. That's our contribution, and we will continue to own the land. But if we can get the cost of the improvements down close to what the buyer can pay, then we can turn the crank. If I have to run out and find $100,000 in subsidy for each house that we build, the rate that we build houses is determined by the rate that I find subsidy, which is slow. We've done almost 1 house a year for the 8 years. We've done 7 houses the 8 years that I've been employed. It's too slow. I'm trying to do 1 with the U of I next year and 4 with federal money next year. That's the pace I want to get to. And the only hope is to figure out how to squeeze the prices down so that I'm not raising $100,000 in subsidy per house. Question?
How big is this house?
Various people tell me various numbers. I believe it's 550 square feet. It would fit well inside this room.
Lessons learned from the first house as far as how it was done?
Yeah.
The second house?
Lots and lots of lessons. Measure twice, cut once. Remember who the team was, okay? No, more importantly, what should the students build and what should we hire? As school started, we went out and said, let's speed this up. Let's get a sheetrocker and sheetrock it, okay? Students would have been cheaper than the $7,500 sheetrocker. But I stood there as I watched that guy work, and I said, what would students have learned as architects? What do they need to know as architects that they would learn by sheetrocking? What a good job looks like, but they won't produce one. How hard it is, that they would learn. So I think what we're gonna do is strategize a bit and say, we started by saying we're gonna have an electrician and we're gonna have a plumber and everything, and a concrete guy, and everything else will be done by the students. I think we've learned we wanna bring in some other trades that just do really quality work that students wouldn't do, and for whom the learning by the students about being an architect is not as valuable. So I think that was the big lesson to me. That affects the budget, obviously. Anyway, but I've used my time. Cody, I'll get this up for you.
Okay, thanks, Nils. And I'll have to figure out how to work in a shot back at you there, but.
Okay, right.
So again, my name's Cody Riddle. I'm with the city of Moscow now for, gosh, a year and I guess a week or two. Came back to Moscow after a stint of about 20 years down in southern Idaho, in Boise. The roles are very, very similar. So today I'd kind of like to focus on the city's role in housing affordability, or just housing in general. So I work in community development. Again, this is a group that handles or administers land use and planning, construction activities, public works construction, grant program. We're a team of about 20 people across those 4 divisions. You'll see a lot of our work surface at various public hearings. Planning and zoning, Board of Adjustment, historic preservation, city council, and then we also provide support to the Urban Renewal Agency here in Moscow. So I wanted to provide some very basic, just high level numbers to get you thinking as we think about housing. If you look here, the city of Moscow housing over the last 3 years, the average home price has increased by nearly 30%, 27%, and in the overall county, it's increased over that period by almost 40%.
That way, we can't see.
And with that, data up until 2020 shows that the income, and you can find different figures out there, but has increased by only about 2% over that same period of time. So I think with sharing those numbers, the housing affordability crisis or challenge is becoming more and more real for more and more people. Selfishly, I just again moved back to Moscow and purchased a home for the first time in 20-something years, and it honestly made me, I've been pretty blessed health-wise, employment-wise, and it still made me sick to my stomach, just the price of housing, and then having 2 girls that recently finished college and high school, and just the attainability, absent generational wealth or things like that, your school teachers, people like that, housing is becoming more and more out of reach for more and more people. So it's very real to me. Another number I wanted to show as it relates to Moscow, if you look back to 2000 up to 2020, we now have demand, and this again based on average household size or a need for about 100 dwelling units a year. And so if you look then at how many we've permitted since over that same period of time, it's actually slowly dropping. You see spikes over a couple of years there, which were some very specific projects. This year it looks like we'll probably permit, give or take a few units, 57 homes. So again, with the need roughly 100. So that lack of supply based on the demand or the need, you can just simple math see what that starts to do to housing. Of those, we'll probably permit 39 or 40 single-family homes this year. Only 12 multifamily units. So affordable rentals, the rental stock, very little. And you can see, and I don't have the specific projects cited here, but you can see how over the years specific projects spike or add to that inventory. So people often ask, well, why doesn't the city or why doesn't local government do more? The fact of the matter is, and it's not to make excuses, at the local level, there's certainly things we can do, but there are very few tools, or we're limited from a state perspective. The National League of Cities actually did, and I think this was from 2019, a publication, and there's a powerful graphic if you look at here where Idaho is shown in red, and this little wheel represents just at the local level in each state what the local government or municipality can do. And you'll notice of all the states listed, Idaho is the only one where none of these tools are available. And so certainly there's something to think about from a state level as you think about why the city isn't doing more. One of the things you'll often see come up is just inclusionary housing. Well, why doesn't the city just require affordable housing? And the fact is that at state level, we simply can't. Again, I don't want to focus on making excuses here. I want to get into the things that at the local level we actually can control. And it's very impressive just what Moscow has done to date to start to move the needle. We can certainly, from a policies perspective, adopt various comprehensive plans, guidance, master plans, and then very specifically our subdivision and land use codes. Mentioned comprehensive plans there. So zoning allowances, just the simple use of land, whether single-family homes are allowed, duplexes are allowed, multifamily units, the size of lots. There's certainly a lot the city can do to make it easier to do the right thing, or easier to do the affordable thing. Dimensional standards in a zoning code are a very big deal. Minimum lot sizes, and in some cases maximum lot sizes, allowances for density in appropriate locations where you can accommodate a higher number of units in kind of a concentrated footprint are very important. One thing that's not real popular I've noticed around here to talk about is parking requirements. And I see even Paul cringe a little bit. But the more real estate or more land you consume with parking, that's space that could be used for other things. So certainly in some locations, really thinking creatively about parking requirements, because it does add a cost. Paved parking adds a cost to development, and there's a balance there where we need to kind of balance the parking requirements with the need for housing. And then certainly the review process, and I think Niels can speak to this a little bit. The development community likes a predictable development process. If it's unpredictable and you go through this 2 or 3 month cycle and maybe you're denied or remanded and you start over, time is money, and it certainly factors into what they can count on and what they can build in a productive way. So what's been done? Moscow's actually done quite a bit over the years. Nils mentioned the allowance for twin homes or townhomes. In 2014, residential allowance in commercial zones. And this is something that many places are still catching up on. I know in leaving Boise, it took us a while to catch up here, where old antiquated zoning from the 60s and 70s would separate all of those uses, commercial, industrial, office, and they had no place together. Moscow actually does allow residential uses in the commercial zones. Mentioned some of the setback requirements. Accessory dwelling units, the allowance in all of the residential zones. Amendments to the plan unit development process, updates to the parking standards, removal of covered parking requirements. All of this factors into just the affordability or what you can do, or making affordable housing a little easier to attain. In 2019, a removal of a lot size requirement for those accessory dwelling units was implemented, and then updates to the manufactured home park ordinances. So certainly, though, that's a good start, but I think there's a lot more that can be done from a zoning perspective. Things as bold as establishing maximum lot sizes in certain locations, where all of the housing has a place, but maybe it's easier to do smaller housing, smaller lots, more affordable housing, and not as easy to do the large estate lots where you consume the same footprint, same amount of land, and achieve half the density. Additional housing by right, instead of going through that 2 or 3 month process that I mentioned there, maybe in certain locations, not so much accessory dwelling units, but maybe there are locations where a duplex or a triplex is simply an allowed use by right, and you're not subject to that 2, 3, 4 month process. Again, the ever so popular parking requirements. Maybe there's additional flexibility that we can look at with reduced parking requirements. That's not something that will work everywhere. I mean, as you have transit available or you're closer to downtown, maybe there's additional flexibility around parking. Certainly dimensional standards. Maybe there are locations where subtle changes to setbacks and height allow us to accommodate additional housing. Again, I think what's important though, you don't want to take it to an extreme where you start to negatively impact neighborhood character. I mean, Moscow's neighborhoods are wonderful. You don't want to take that to the extent where the housing that's built is a stark contrast to what's there and it negatively impacts the character. And then finally, where we can't require affordable housing, maybe we start to look at actually incentives where additional density is allowed. There are trade-offs there. Other communities are certainly starting to look at things like that. And I see we're getting down to about 10 minutes, so those are the things I wanted to share. I'm happy to answer questions along with these gentlemen. So, yeah.
Well, when the city finally started allowing the accessory dwelling units, have people built them? Have there been many of them built?
Yeah, I certainly think there have been more and more built, and accessory dwelling units are something that I actually had the opportunity to work on in Boise a little bit, and we actually amended our code there a few years ago to where we increased the size subtly from 600 to 700 square feet, which I think ours here is 600 square feet now, and we allowed a second bedroom, and then some tweaks around parking, and that actually allowed, because our code right now, this is a perfect example, accessory dwelling units are capped at 2 occupants. So right off the bat, an accessory dwelling unit is capped at 600 square feet, and it technically can't accommodate a small family. A couple with a child would be prohibited as the code sits today.
What about the utilities for the second dwelling unit? Is that part of the main house, or is it separate?
Not sure on that. I think you'd probably have one tap at the street, and they both serve off of that. But we could certainly, that's another opportunity to look at the way that the fees are charged to the second dwelling unit, and things like that.
Yeah, I have a question. Can you go back to the slide where it talks about the process with the Planning and Zoning Commission, right there? Towards the very end, P&Z RCS approval. That happens quite late in the process.
Yep.
And I see a problem with that. I've been to planning and zoning meetings where, the plans are totally detailed, everything's laid out, everybody's signed all the papers and everything like that, and it's like it gets to P&Z, and what do? They don't have a lot of choice. I mean, if they turn it down, then they're gonna have to justify turning that down. And they have said in the past, and I've heard them say this, well, if we turn them down, then we should have turned those other guys down, or should we, it's a problem, I think. And the RCS form they fill out, is that what it is? Doesn't have anything, does it have any requirements for affordability?
It certainly doesn't, and again, they're limited. State law, there's no requirement around affordability. We can't, in Moscow, Boise, wherever else, we can't require affordability. In terms of the relevant criteria and standards, certainly there are some very subjective things in there, compatibility, adverse impacts, things like that, and then some very objective standards. And certainly if someone checks all of those boxes, you'd be hard pressed to deny something if it meets all the dimensional standards and things like that. But with the subjective kind of standards, there is latitude, and the reason it's only a recommendation you have at those hearings, and so.
It just seems to happen very late in the process, and I didn't know if the RCS could be revised somehow. If the city decided, I don't know, is it part of our comprehensive plan to focus on some affordable housing?
Oh, certainly there are policies around that, and I think some of the dimensional standards and some of those things I mentioned, more incentive or allowance based, get to affordability as opposed to the actual hard requirement, which we really can't do.
It's just that I've been to many meetings where the housing that's proposed is definitely not affordable, and it's for large families, has a large footprint, uses a lot of water. Anyway, just wanted to say that.
That's one thought, and there's another question. I'll just speak to that briefly. There was a decision recently where that very debate came up around large lots, and they do nothing to add to affordability. All housing helps. I mean, we need housing across all income levels, and certainly where some of these larger estate lots don't specifically provide affordable housing, it does allow somebody to maybe upgrade or move up to a newer, larger home, maybe their dream home, and then it frees up inventory at different income levels. So it all certainly helps, and I think there's a need for housing across all income levels.
Could you just remind us relevant criteria and standards?
Oh, relevant,
So
yeah,
they-
RCS, relevant criteria and standards. It's where the city goes back and adopts the approval criteria and the justification for approving projects or denying.
With respect to incentives, can you give examples of the kinds of incentives that would make affordable housing more likely to be built?
It gets a little tricky, but I mean, you could certainly think about maybe there's added density that's allowed, that if you provide a certain number of affordable units, that you're allowed additional units at market rate. And so it starts to, it's a different spreadsheet than Nils provided, but it certainly factors into that, where if there's a higher return on a certain number of units, maybe somebody like Nils is motivated to provide or can provide further affordable units.
And you would you build that into the city code?
I think you would ultimately, for it to be successful, it would need to be part of the city code, yeah.
And
I
then
can
one
hog that.
more question if I can. and
Yeah.
I'll let others. But to what extent are you working with the county in the area of impact to make some more land available within the area of impact? Because that land seems to be a limiting factor.
Land, it's certainly a limited factor. I think you have to be careful of providing the housing in correct locations. I mean, annexing and sprawl, expanding out in the county while it provides housing there are unintended consequences around water use, traffic congestion, things like that. So it's certainly a balancing act.
I think this question is more directed at Nils. I'm wondering why the emphasis on single-family housing. It seems like for the same footprint, you could build, say, a fourplex or a triplex and house several families for not an exact multiple of the single family.
Good question about where our focus is. My board has chosen to focus on home ownership as opposed to rental, feeling that there was a lot of things going on in the rental space and that home ownership was a challenge. That addresses a financial piece, but the other part to your question is a form piece. And we did a project that we finished and we held an open house for like the week before COVID shut down the world. It was a 3-unit townhouse. So I bought, and I used the city's lot split rules, I bought a wide lot, which had been planned to be a single family house. And then I split it in thirds. And so I took a $75,000 lot and added $3,000 in engineering, which was just somebody with a computer drawing lines, really. And I had 3 lots for $78,000. It's a common wall kind of house, right? Your house has a wall which is your neighbor's wall, and in the case of 3, somebody's in the middle. But that got 3 houses on one $75,000 lot. So yes, that form factor, and we sold them individually, slices from ground to sky. Tip it up on its side and put them in layers like pancakes. Now you get into some kind of a condo arrangement, not undoable, adds another layer of complexity to the whole legal piece. So I'd rather if we could do ground to sky kind of solutions. But yeah, I'm for higher density, if we went back in here, when the city did, I was on P&Z when the city did the twin home, buy a lot and split it, and then the townhome, buy a lot and you can cut it into at least 8 pieces. Those are good. Those are definitely improvements in terms of land efficiency.
You talked about having students help with the building. Is there any opportunity for working with Habitat for Humanity?
Working with Habitat is a great question. Jennifer and I talk regularly, their director, and we keep trying to figure out how to collaborate. We have we each do the same things, and we do all of them differently. They use volunteers. I use a contractor. They self-finance the project. You'll see their big Beans and Jeans and other fundraisers to raise the funds for their project. I borrow the money. So we have tried to figure out whether they could build on land that the Housing Trust already owns, build us Housing Trust. The University of Idaho was my contractor. The students were paid, but my view of it was developer to contractor. And there were volunteers on the site, other than I got to clean up the garbage. I was the volunteer garbage guy. I'm using the twin house land division thing to make more houses on less land. And so far, Habitat hasn't been ready to take on a twin house. They recruit a family and they go through a process. They would have to recruit 2 families. You can't build half of a twin house because of the common law. So far they haven't figured out how they want to go over that. We talk about it. I'd be happy to do it. They would be my contractor, using whatever process they have to be a contractor, right? Volunteers and recruiting families and all of that, which is, I'm fine with that. But the land I have available is not quite suitable for the way they're ready to work right now. We'll figure it out. Nancy. Go ahead, Nancy.
An email I received this morning from Brundage ski area prompts this question. I'm wondering if you or Bob perhaps are starting to see any traction in the employer and business community as far as providing assistance for maybe communal living arrangements or something like that. This Brundage Mountain acquired a housing space for dormitory style living, very nicely appointed, because they knew they needed workforce housing. I'm wondering if we're seeing incentives like that even for rental opportunities. Would St. Vincent de Paul and partners invest in something like that?
I'll let Bob start, and I've got a follow-up to him.
Okay, great, thank you.
Wow, that is a really good question, and something that should be part of the discussion in the community. As rents keep going up, as the cost for homes obviously keep going up, it makes it more and more difficult for these people who are making minimum wage to find affordable housing. And it's not just rents for apartments. Lot rents for, the trailer parks have gone up considerably too. I can't speak on how much that's gone up. I haven't done that kind of research on it, but something like your proposal for that kind of thing is a very good idea.
So Nancy, I'll tell you 2 quick stories. A year and a half ago, my board said, yes, we're called Moscow Affordable Housing Trust, but we need to expand, at least as consultants, our service across Region 2. So this county, Clearwater, Shoshone, Idaho, Nez Perce. I'm talking to the folks in Riggins. If you think when you drive south through Riggins, somewhere about halfway down on the right's a grocery store. The grocery store bought the apartment building behind them, and they're using it for employee housing. Yes, that sort of thing is happening, and because employers are saying, well, the market isn't fixing this problem for me. I have to fix the problem myself. And Ketchum, Idaho, Sun Valley area, The Blaine County School District owns land. They are partnering with my counterpart in Ketchum. School district will continue to own the land. The housing trust will build the housing and will rent it to school district employees by rules set up by the school district to make it affordable and to determine who has highest priority. They hope to do 10 houses in that model. And they are willing to offer that formula that they've developed, all the lawyering that they took, to other school districts in the state if they wanted to. And I've tried to offer it to Riggins, because it turns out the school district owns the last of the flat ground in Riggins. Anyway, so yes, employers creating housing, and then your alarm bells of various kinds will go off when you think about problems that could generate from that. But employers are stepping in to do that sort of thing. I think we're out of time.
We just, yeah. It sounds like Paul
The
has.
one person that's obviously missing from a lot of these conversations is the development community. And we really need to engage with them better, because again, they have a business model that has an expected return on that investment. And obviously, the housing that we're talking about, affordable and attainable, isn't necessarily in their business model. So there are some cool things going on with the Panhandle Affordable Housing Alliance, where they are engaging with the development community and getting builders like Architera to commit a certain portion of a new subdivision development toward a more affordable house. And again, so things are starting to loosen up, but again, we gotta sit down with our building community, our developers, and say, okay, what are those cost drivers? We kind of know land, utility hookups, all that stuff, but we gotta figure out and create a different business model, and if we have to recruit a different kind of builder and developer, we need to do that. Thank you.
You know, I have a sense that we could go on all afternoon. This is such an important topic and so diverse, as you've heard today. We thank you all for your interest in the subject. I hope that our presenters can linger for just a moment. I know at least Cody probably has to get right back to work without lunch or something, but we certainly appreciate your time today. We appreciate your interest. And please stay tuned for the League of Women Voters Poverty Study, which includes coverage of housing issues. Lauren, did you have something you would add?
No, I was just counting.
Very good. Okay, please join me in thanking our panelists.